Hey now, Adam Reaver, fu-tone.com, back in my less crappier video series. This video has nothing to do with fu-tone, actually. I was taking my amp, my Soldano SLO100, to get serviced. It was kind of sluggish, and I called my friend Andy Fuchs over at Fuchs Amplifiers to set up an appointment for service, and I figured I would document it just to share it with you. Not everybody knows what it means to get an amp service or why you would get an amp service. So I thought it'd be fun just to share and have you check it out. So here we go. Soldano SLO100 service at my good friend Fuchs Amplifiers. Check it out. Hey now, Adam Reaver, fu-tone.com, over at Fuchs Audio with my good friend Andy Fuchs today. I'm bringing in my Soldano SLO100 to be serviced, and I figured I would just shoot a little spot video for everybody to explain what servicing an amp really means, because everyone kind of tosses it around, and I want you to just see what we're doing. Right?
Absolutely.
See? Now you know. So we're going to open it up, and then I'll just ask Andy as he goes, what he's doing and why at the key points, and you'll check it out.
Basically what we're going to do today is we're going to take the amp apart and get inside, have a look around. We're going to check mostly the date codes on key components like the filter capacitors. We're going to clean pots, we're going to clean switches, we're going to clean sockets. We're going to put a fresh set of power tubes in. I normally don't change preamp tubes unless there's a problem with noise or the gain is down or they're microphonic. If they're good, I'm not a big fan of making you spend money on something that you don't need. I'd rather you buy a couple of spares and keep them in your gig bag if the tubes in your amp are good. We're going to show you how we check bias. In some cases, in some amps, we add a bias test point that does not exist, and I'll show you how we do that. We'll set the bias, we'll do some play testing, and you get an idea of what a proper overhaul on an amp consists of and the right way to do it.
Here we go.
So what we see here is basically original filter caps. The amp was probably built around 1989 or 1990. The date codes on the capacitors in this case indicate the 18th week of 1989. They're quality parts, they're Mallory. However, electrolytic capacitors, after 20 years, they begin to degrade. It's a very slow and subtle degradation. It's a lot like having dirty glasses. You don't realize how dirty they are until you clean them. So typically, just based on age, we take them out, we replace them with a quality, modern, equivalent capacitor. And the change is usually very obvious in terms of sound. A better, tighter low end, a little bit more clean headroom, in some cases a little bit less hum overall, and certainly worth doing. The parts are not expensive, and if you're under the hood, you should change them all. If you're tuning an engine, change all your spark plugs. All right, so here we are complete. We have installed all new filter capacitors, all new bias filter capacitors, all new low-level audio filter capacitors for the high voltage, and we replaced the low voltage channel switching power supply capacitor as well. This was a 1000 mic. We didn't have a 1000 mic, so we put a couple of 470s piggyback. We got pretty close to 1000. The value there is not critical. Point is, we put in a brand new capacitor, so one less possibility for failure. One of the most important components you're going to get whenever this kind of work is done on your amplifier by a legitimate technician is going to be these goodies. Everything that was put in your amplifier and taken out and replaced, you want your old parts back. Because believe it or not, there are people that will charge you for a cap job, and they maybe don't do everything they say they did. And that's not cool. We also replaced the screen resistors on the power tubes. There's 4 of them in this amp because it's a 100-watt amp. And what that does is it limits the screen grid current in the power tubes. The original was 470 ohms, which is fine back in the day when power tubes were manly. Today, modern tubes are not as strong as older tubes, so we raised that up to about 1,000 ohms. We put a 1K 3-watt in there. It makes life a little bit easier on the power tubes. They'll be less failure prone if you hit them really hard. It just limits the screen current a little bit, does not alter the sound in a major way. Perhaps a slight bit smoother clipping, but not something that would be noticeable unless somebody told you it was there. All the caps caps have a dab of silicone underneath them. Because these caps are so small, Mr. Soldano's great idea of wire tying caps down won't work because the holes are located where the old caps used to be, so we couldn't do the wire ties. But we did run silicone under all the caps. We used the wire tie where we could, just so they don't go anywhere when you're on tour and it's in the back of your 18-wheeler flying down the highway. So that's basically that. Next thing we're going to do is spray out all the pots where we can. These are sealed pots, so I don't think we're going to do much with those. We will treat the jacks with protectorant, make sure the contacts are clean, and we're going to light it up and bias it.
Cool, man.
Okay, so now what we're about to do is check the bias in this amp. What we've done in here, for clarity's sake, is we've interrupted the primary of the output transformer. It's a blue wire in this amp coming from the power supply and going into the output transformer. What we've put on a little terminal strip is a 1 ohm resistor. It does nothing to the sound whatsoever or the performance of the amp. However, it gives us a convenient place to check our bias current. If you do the math, when you use a 1 ohm resistor, 1 millivolt equals 1 milliamp. Kind of cute the way we did that. So I can look at my meter when I turn on my standby switch, and I will see the total current of my output stage, which right now is 130 mA for the 4 tubes, thereabouts. So we're almost at what I'd like to see is probably 120. The amp is connected to a variac back here, so I know I'm giving it 120 volts. And I'm at 120 mA, which means 30 mA per 6L6, which is conservative. You can bias a 6L6 up to 36, 40 mA even if you want to. I tend to go a little bit on the lighter side, particularly in metal amps, because people are going to hit them really hard. We want to be a little bit easier on the tubes. So the bias, I use the bias pot here very carefully, and I just turn it until I see 120 millivolts. Please remember, we are reading a DC voltage. We are not reading MA, milliamps. Don't go on the current setting of your meter because your reading will be all wrong. So you want to be on DC millivolts on your meter, and when you see 120 in the case of this amp, we know we got 30 mA because what we have in the amp is a matched set of Ruby tubes, 6L6s, and they all have the same current marked on their test label on the bottom. So these tubes are all, for the most part, equal to one another. There's other ways of doing it. It's a little more involved. You could put a 1 ohm resistor on each power tube, pin 8. It requires a whole bunch of cutting, a whole bunch of soldering, and that would allow you to read each individual power tube, but you only have one bias pot. So there's really no benefit to that. And if you're using a matched set of tubes, all the more reason you don't need that. The only good thing is it'll show you the wear of the tubes, how consistent they are from tube to tube a couple of years down the line. Most guys don't want to do that level of work in their amp. But as it stands right now, we've completed the maintenance and upgrade to this lovely 1990 Soldano, and we're going to plug it in and play it.
That was it. That was amazing. I had so much fun doing that with Andy up there, and I learned a lot even about what went on in the service. I especially dug the point where he puts the silicone under the caps to keep them from vibrating. I thought that was pretty genius. Andy's great, man. So if you have repairs or general service on anything, that's your guy. You could send it in, he'll send it back. And even better, he makes the greatest amps. So check out the Fuchs amps. He's got a killer line of everything under the sun that will do whatever you want it to do. So thank you, Andy and Annette Fuchs, for that. I'm going to give you a quick taste of what this amp sounds like now. I'll give you a little clean and then a little dirty. We'll check it out. The amp it corners like a Ferrari. It drives like a sports car. It's tight, it's powerful. It does what you ask it to do. I don't fight it, it doesn't lag. You know, you hit it, it's there. You go light, it's there. So when your amp's running in tip-top shape and everything else is going for you, I mean, this is the fun of what we do. So enjoy, check out Fuchs amps, check out their URL right here. And as usual, fu-tone.com for all your tremolo upgrade needs.
Fuchs amps video. What did you do? Fuchs amps video. Take 4. fu-tone. Fuchs amps video. What are you doing? For fu-tone.